Okay. So, how are we doing?
I'm really finding that I got my schedule at work changed so that they won't schedule me for Sunday morning
Oh,
or
that's
Thursday
great.
evening. I've been finding that the time here is really centering me and staying with me throughout the rest of the week. So it's been I'm really appreciated, feel very blessed to have this available.
This is exactly how I feel about the Dharma. It's like when I used to go to the weekly teachings up in North Carolina by Geshe Gellick, and of course I knew the material because I'd been studying for a long, a while and blah blah blah. But it's like a Dharma booster shot. Ugh. Like, oh yeah, that's right. Be kind to others. But it just feels good, to have that contact. And community is so important for our practice because not everybody thinks this way. And so you don't get much support out in society in general. And so it's very helpful to um, touch base with other people or at least hear the Dharma because it's not easy. So wonderful. Any questions? Yes, go, Debbie.
When you're observing your mind or you're catching it, in a story, is there a special way to look at your point of view? Like I was looking at my aversion
Mhm.
to work and just like I was trying to sit and certain things came up like
Sure.
I don't want responsibility, I want free time and, I'm never gonna be able to retire. Everybody else retires. I have to work the rest of my, like, I would see things that come up, but I wasn't sure how to go further in.
Well, okay, so what we want to try to avoid is the long list of complaints without solutions.
Yeah.
Like if you have to work for the rest of your life, yeah. Okay. So then you want to go, so I really want to try to find a way to like my job because I have to do it. I mean, maybe not this job, but I have to work for the rest of my life instead of focusing on I have to work. And trust me, it's, retiring, you can complain about that too. So it's really kind of amusing because it's the habit of mind. So if you're in the habit of mind now of complaining about having to do these things, don't think it'll change once you're doing something else. I mean, at first it's all delightful and then, and then it's not, because this is the habit we have. We focus on what we don't like. So we want to break that. And so it's really important for you to, okay, you may have to work for the rest of your life because you don't have a pension, you don't have enough money, blah, 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 blah. So you say, okay, I'm not the only one. Most of the people in the world work until they die. Retirement's a first world problem, and not everybody in that world gets to retire, so you're not alone. That's important. You also provide a service. So it's really important to remember that this is, that your job provides you an opportunity to benefit others. So it's a really good thing to be doing on your way to enlightenment. It's the kind of thing that will get you there, but only if you're happy about it, because you want to look at it as, if you're complaining about your job, basically you were regretting benefiting others. So you want to step back and think, oh, no, I don't regret benefiting others. It would be nice to retire, but I want to benefit others even when I retire. But you have to, you really need to reframe it so that you can see the benefits to you for working. That's really important because you like to eat, right? You like to have shelter. These are things that your work provides you, not to mention the service you provide others. So it's this, so you want to interrupt just the complaining mind, just saying, well, that's not helping. And then when you have the space, you want to think about the value of your job, what it gives to you, what you give to others through your job. And let that sink in. When you have a moment that you kind of go, you remember some incident where it was obviously really helping someone, you dwell in that moment. When you're working, when you realize you're really helping someone, you might not like them. Liking them is not the point, but you're able to really help them take that in. How wonderful it is that you have a skill that you can benefit others with. And you have a job that, will feed you too, so, that you get to eat also because you get a paycheck. So, it's a win-win. So,
That's helpful, that's really helpful. Because like it's always contrasted with the beach and no responsibility, like the life without
yeah,
that. But
you'll never get enlightened that way. Lazing around doesn't get you there. Lazing around is part of the power of relinquishment. We do need to rest. We do need to, have an enjoyment of all our merit is what brings us things to enjoy. So there's nothing wrong with enjoying them. But thinking that's the purpose of life is probably going too far, because then you're just wasting all that merit on frivolous activities. And yeah, so it's when you work like with your mind like that, at some point you might wake up and think, oh, I'm so glad I have people to go benefit, which you would not have if you were retired, unless you didn't just hang out at the beach.
I had a lot of gratitude, just being lucky to have, these classes so close, well, a long driving, right? But close to where I live, and other people never found teaching or seeking books, let alone with a teacher in person.
Yeah, no, it's, and thank goodness. I mean, Zoom, that's the one good thing that COVID did for us is, those of us who are out in the corporate world dealing with meetings all the time on online or whatever, we discovered the way to connect through this method. So that's nice.
Speaking of which, you finished?
Fully completed.
Will you be available on Zoom at any time till next fall?
Well, I'm always available if someone calls me and says, can I talk? And we can just have a Zoom call. I do it all the time.
Formal teaching class, starter class?
Probably not this summer. So I'm doing some retreats. I'm also going to try to find some land in North Carolina, trying to start a nuns community. So I'll be busy doing that kind of thing, looking around for property and rules. It's incredible.
So are you leading retreats?
No, not leading them. I'm taking them. That's that desire for no responsibility.
Yeah. I did want to ask about the responsibility part, that weight feeling of responsibility. That's sort of, I think, thinking that you're the one that's trying to fix somebody or right? And there's something wrong with that. Like,
yeah, that's not the right attitude. Yeah. No, you just want to provide them the service that you can and hope that they benefit. That the responsibility is to do your job appropriately, without risking their, whatever well-being, and it doesn't mean you'll always know exactly how to do that. It just means, you don't get mad at them for showing up to their appointment when you'd really like not to have to do that, so it's, but everybody has a responsibility all the time. We are interdependent. So our attitude towards others is our responsibility. We also have to take care of ourselves, that's a responsibility. We have to participate in society. We have to stop at stoplights, those kind of things, so that accidents don't occur. So there is no absence of responsibility, period. That's what mindfulness helps you do. You're mindful of the other people and wherever you are. If you care to be pleasant to them, to notice if they're having a bad day, giving them a word of, just smiling, that kind of thing. But that's what an interdependent society, and world, and that's, His Holiness is fond of saying that it isn't survival of the fittest. It's the survival of those who cooperate. We have to work together, and it's, that there's a point at which the survival of the fittest is no longer relevant, and that's most of our lives. So, that's relevant at reproduction. And that's about it. So, and even in these days, of course, we don't need the same traits that we needed when we were living in the caves. Of course, we might need those again in the future. So anyway, but so if we reorient ourselves towards what I'm giving to others and how this benefits me on the path to enlightenment, rather than, oh my goodness, what this doesn't give to us, we're better off, especially on things we can't change. If we can't change it, no, why worry? Yeah, if we can change it, change it. It's.
And I was thinking that, like, I always feel like I don't have the answer to what to talk their problem, but that maybe is like a call to be more present and like try to experience what they're talking about. So like,
Yeah, and not having an answer is perfectly fine. What most people need, an ear, and then if you really listen, you might discover there's something that maybe you could find out for them. You don't have to have the answer, in fact, it's much better to feel like you don't have the answer than to think you do. We way too often just think, oh, I have the answer. Well, we're talking about a completely different human being or any kind of being. So it's, so anyway, I don't know. I hope that helps.
Thank you for saying all this, Venerable Tendron, because it really, to me, it's like you just answer all my questions just right there.
Well, it's the Buddha. The Buddha is really good with his teachings, And
On fire.
It's all, it's been gold for me. It's really, changed everything about me, I had to do the work, but
yeah, I felt like you got me because you were like, you were there, and that's what was inspiring.
And this, well, this is the benefit of really listening to people, because that provides you the opportunity with being of help. You're not really listening when it comes your turn to talk. You're guessing because you haven't been listening. If you've been worried about yourself, oh, I don't think I'm going to know the answer to this. Oh, I don't know how I can be of help. You're not listening. And it's okay to pause after you respond, before you respond. Let them talk, listen, ask any questions to clarify if you don't feel like you heard it correctly, or you just mirror it back. And if they go, no, that's not right, but to have a conversation where you're really 100% there for that person who's speaking, and that's a skill. But it's one you can work on. It's not, it's just like when you meditate, where you have to go, oh, I'm traveling over here. Pull your mind back. You have to do the same thing. Oh, I want to be listening. And that's part of it, is like, it really helps, at least for me, it has really helped me when I'm listening to someone and then I get pulled away in my mind, for me to go, I'm sorry, I just missed that. I wasn't listening. And I'd really like to know what you said. Do you mind repeating it? And that helps me remember I really want to listen. Because our habit isn't that. Some people come that way. It's great, but most of us are caught up in our own little world, and we're just, so we easily get pulled. So but being able to say that out loud just is a little reminder for me. Oh yeah, that's right. I want to listen, and I have to stay focused, but I'm not going to be perfect at it, and that's okay too. We don't all have to be like Ananda, Shakyamuni Buddha's attendant, who remembered all the teachings and continue, for the oral tradition before they were written down, which was like 300 years later. We have a lot of gratitude for all the people who listened well. We were laughing at how there were the Tibetan Geshis that had been asked to teach here. Lamas Rinpoche decided to have a class. For a little while, the international office was in Taos, New Mexico. And so he invited them to come to Taos and learn some Dharma English. And, to help their, because all of them, they don't speak English when they get here. They have to learn it. Some do now because they teach it in the monasteries. But so he had already been here a while. I wouldn't call him fluent because his grammar is, but he really has a huge vocabulary, so he's pretty good at it. I couldn't do it, but so he goes out there and he said, whoever was teaching the English part had PowerPoint presentations, and all the Geshis are going, I'm sorry, I don't even know what you're trying to say. They couldn't, that form of communication, since they're totally in an oral tradition, did not help them at all. Charts.
Like they didn't understand like the purpose of a PowerPoint.
They couldn't follow it. It was like, this bizarre thing, that I know but this is, that's not how they learned. They had to memorize the teachings before they showed up to class. And then they taught, every day they'd have to memorize 2 pages of the teachings. They go to class. The teacher would teach on those. You can't bring your books to class, and then you go debate on those 2 pages, and, and then you come back the next day having memorized the next 2 pages. Yeah, it's a wholly different, completely different. But boy, they have memories like traps.
You teach kindergartners.
I know, it's wild. It's but it's just it just goes to show you, we're not all living with the same resources. And then it also that it's hard for an adult to try to learn a new way to learn, because we all learn from the time we're little, so and Westerners have the same problem with their style, because they're not used to memorizing. Coming to class prepared, all that stuff. It's a whole different thing. So,
But because the computer, you don't have it.
well, that's
They
the,
walk out of the room. and
oh, yeah,
all the neural pathways.
yeah. Oh, it's a great way to learn. Their minds stay sharp, and, it's really remarkable. They'll pull out their mala and go, okay, where is it? you know, because they know they memorize whole outlines to books to text. So they know, you know, they just have to kind of follow the thing, go and get to the right point, and then they can tell you what it says. It's impressive.
I mean, they go through their mental file.
Yeah, they just use a mala to get to as
They use a what?
a mala,
Beads.
the beads, as a way, because malas are counters. You just use them to count, you know, they get blessed by the number of mantras you know, you count on them, but they're also counters. And so they all memorize things using their mala as a way to orient themselves to where they would be.
Buddhist advocates.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So anyway, they're also not nervous about not knowing the answer, because they have to debate right off when they first start their studies in the Dharma. They spend their early years memorizing all the rituals, you know, and some of the text. And then when they actually start their studies, debate is how they train. And so they, you know, and they're going to be nothing but wrong in that first year. So, you know, but they figure it out. But so they're not nervous about it. It's fun to watch them in the debate courtyard because it's very noisy, and you know, the person doing the debate jumps up and keeps making his points, you know, and then somebody kind of elbows him out of the way because they've got a better point, you know, all this stuff. It's pretty fun.
Buddhist parliament.
Hmm?
Buddhist parliament.
Well, it's a little rowdier than that. Well, not always, but they have little groups, and they're in their little debate groups, so it's kind of fun. Anyway, I digress. So, anything else come up this week? Hey, Jack.
For me, I guess,
Okay.
just contemplating, kind of what happiness, the difference between like depression, like what it really means to be happy. I always assumed that if I wasn't born the way I am, where I just naturally seem to be depressed, and there's other people who they say that they never experience it at all, like ever in their whole lives.
Yeah.
And I'm just was contemplating, what does that mean? Like, I feel like if I didn't have that, there would be no reason why I would ever be sad or like complain on anything. I feel like I would just be perfectly fine, like functioning through life.
If you didn't have the depression?
Yes.
It's funny. I just listened to a talk about that, you know, that depression might not be the right word. It may be a certain melancholy that, you know, your perspective on life, you know, but that can mean that you're quite alive. Because, you know, because let's face it, there's a lot of wrong going on in the world, you know, and always has been, you know, and so it's like you might have a more realistic point of view on many things, you know, so it's like, but this, you know, it's like learning to take those the things you worry about or dissatisfied. I mean, the Buddha's whole thing is about samsara is dissatisfying. We will not have any satisfied moments that, you know, it can't last. You know, we can have very sporadic, you know, enjoyment that doesn't last, you know, and that this can lead to renunciation of wanting to be in samsara. What does renunciation mean? I always have
Give something up.
to give something up. And what are you giving up?
Craving, if you can.
That's one thing you give up. Overall, what are you giving up? Suffering.
Oh.
So one of the students that teaches, she always calls it rejoiciation, because you're giving up suffering. But you have to get out of samsara to achieve that state of mind, you know, because this place is the nature of suffering, you know. So being able to look at that disposition of mind is not necessarily, I mean, obviously can handicap you in life, and just, but if you start looking at it from a different angle, you might find that it's a strength, that it can be used as a useful tool, and developing equanimity so that it doesn't, so you're less concerned about that, the way, you're feeling. This is one of our problems. I mean, one of the things is we talk about happiness way too much in our society, and yeah.
Well, I just want to like add to, there's some people who are depressed and some people
Oh, absolutely.
who say they're just never depressed.
Yeah. And some people
just
are
like-
never depressed and they're probably insane. What can we say? I'm teasing.
Well, just like the people I've met, like those types who are like, oh, like depression, like what even is that? Like what? Like,
Yeah.
I don't feel that. Like those types of people, I feel like they're the least aware of when they hurt another person.
Yes.
Or least aware of their negative action.
They have like probably a lot of, what is it?
Like, they can
Dopamine
be,
or something
like,
going on.
great, nice people, but if they do like a mean thing, they'll be like, oh, that thing wasn't mean because I'm nice.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I mean about being more alive, that you're responding to the world. So it's this, so accepting that that's your point of view, and recognizing that you don't have to let it bother you, which just sounds outrageous, it can, but if we're always trying to like fix that, then you can't be, that's just like a permanent problem you've given yourself, and we don't have to look at things that way, yeah.
So self-compassion, excuse me, self-compassion.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about a situation like that where, you're dark, you're in a dark place. Summoning self-compassion.
Yeah, but also if you've
Very-
always been in that place, that's different from having reactive depression, where something's going on and it's that you're suffering from, and so then your mood gets affected. Self-compassion is always good, I mean, I'm not saying don't do that, but it's more of just, it's also one, okay, how in the path, and it talks about it in the book, that we, one of the things that we want to work with is the truth of suffering, and really understand that living in samsara, that there is true suffering, and you want to feel that. You definitely want self-compassion, and not just for yourself. You want to come from that angle of going, wow, this is bad, and then remember the billions of other beings that have to go through this too. It's we want to use it as a motivation to get out of samsara, not to just, it's good enough, so you'll be back again and again and again and again with that craving mind, so it's this process of using it in a way that might work for you, finding some of it, and you'll have to investigate, because there'll be times when it's like something, we wake up and we're just kind of, those minds, if we don't feed it, if we don't sit there going, oh, what a drag, I'm feeling this way again, da 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 da. If you just say, oh well, that's the way it is today, this is the tone of this morning, and not give it any power, then you can work with it to use it as a way to, oh, yeah, that's right. I really want to work on my mind, work on my actions so that I can get out of samsara altogether. And it takes that tolerance of, and well, first you have to recognize true suffering. We need to get that. And then we need to recognize the cause of suffering. So what could be a cause of long-term, or being born with a melancholy attitude? That could be one. How about previous lives?
Let me guess. What about
So
hateful thoughts?
hateful thoughts or complaining thoughts, always looking for the bad,
I just always felt like a victim.
Yeah,
Everything that
same
was
thing.
happening.
Yeah, somebody else's fault. Yeah, that's what we do. And that's not correct. It doesn't change the fact that everybody's doing that. It's not like we're the only ones who are getting it wrong. Everybody's getting it wrong. And so it's really about, this is why it's so important to go from recognizing your own suffering and seeing just how bad that is, to going, and everybody else has this experience, because that's our interdependence, and so that's why that encourages us not to just care about ourselves, but to also be helpful to others, so that and then we look at our causes and we work on that, but it's being that way doesn't have to determine how you live your life. You've gotten this far, it really, now we all want to feel better. That's a craving we have, and it's not that it's weird, it's natural to want to feel better.
That you label it a craving.
Well, it is a craving in our world. That's why we chase our cravings with food we like, with wanting a different job, with, blah, blah, blah. I just like to feel a little better. When the truth of the matter is, we're never going to feel great in this world, because it's samsara. We'll always have, that moment will pass and we'll have to replace it with some other thing. And that moment will pass. And we'll have to, yeah.
So I wanted to bring up ignorance as a topic, I guess, related to it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, in my perspective, people who are never depressed, it's almost like they're on a drug. They're taking a drug and they're just on that drug for the rest of their lives. And that's like the way they chose to be born, I guess, in this lifetime. And that usually breeds ignorance for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So but I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say is that I don't want to be stuck in ignorance either, but I think the depression helps to make sure that I am not stuck in that like drug
Oblivion.
ignorance, I guess.
Well, it's just like what John was saying, people who think everything's great are generally not mindful of others. Now, they may have a really good life. I mean, it may be that for them, they don't run into too many obstacles, but it can make them very oblivious to others, so that they'll say things, they'll do things, they won't take into account that other people's situations are not the same as theirs. And so they stay in that state by basically being blind to everything else. And so that's not useful, and that's what God realms are like, where you have no problems at all. And all you do is exhaust all your good karma, and then you have a miserable death. And you fall to a lower realm. I mean, it's just, so so I think you're right that being more attentive to all the different facets of the world, is helpful, and the ignorance is that we think that this self-centered perspective is useful, and it's not. You know, it's the opposite of that. It actually prevents us from getting the help from others that we might need, from being able to participate, you know, in things by being able to be compassionate towards oneself and others, you know, and being able to recognize the difficulties people have and blah, 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 you know. So we want to, so this is why I say, you know, so you wake up and you're in the same mood, you know, and you just kind of go, well, okay, that's, you know, because you don't worry about yourself too much, you know, and just keep, you know,
Yeah, you're not, I guess a lot of people in the society we live in they're seeking comfort, a
yes,
comfortable life,
Yeah.
an easy life, a happy life. And they're always like, and they always ask like, oh, are you happy? And I never know what they mean by that.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's fine, you know, so you just go, oh, yeah, yeah. You don't have to be directly honest with everybody because if they're not going to get it, then there's no, you know, whatever you might, because there's a difference between, like, you know, like people who are really satisfied with their lives, that has a different quality, you know. They're not craving, they're able to enjoy the moment, they just experience life, and even the bad moments of life, they just experience it, you know, and they don't get caught up in the past too much or the future too much, you know. So it's this the more we can work on teasing out that self-centered angle, you know, when that perspective is present, because our disturbing states of mind arise from that. So we really want to, when we're getting too, it's all about me, and we know it's not really all about us, but that's how we feel it. So that's not helpful. Yeah.
Well, I have like a friend who kind of makes being depressed part of his identity.
Mhm.
Like his name on like all the social medias are like saddest person ever, like 13.
So he must need a lot of attention.
Like I try to be like as best as a friend as I can. Like
Yeah.
he lives in Miami. I've never met him. Just like I say to him like every 2 weeks, like let's hang out, sometime. He's like, okay, when? And then we plan a date, and he just never responds.
Right. So he's stuck.
He is stuck.
Yeah. That's very sad.
Like I even try to I try to like give him like advice, like, oh, you're like this, doing this has helped me with my depression.
Yeah. And it just may not
It'll
work.
just never,
Yeah. But you can still be
but he's just not
a
really
voice.
like, I don't really feel like he's a great friend.
No, he's not. He's too caught up in himself. You know, he doesn't have much to give when he's trapped in this identity, you know, and that's unfortunate. You know, you're willing, but he doesn't sound capable. He's not at a spot where he's really capable of that, which is why he makes plans and never shows up. You know, it's all about him or her or whatever, you know. It's just it's a that's why it's so important to not get caught up in our own moods. Our moods go all over the place. You know, they get worse, they get a little lighter, they get worse, you know, blah, blah, blah. And we just can go insane following our moods, you know. So we just need to kind of go, well, okay. And we can either let that stop us or not, you know, and just keep. Now, I know there can, you know, there's physiological things that go on, and it's really helpful if you can find a medication that helps you with that. No problem with that. You know, no problem with therapy. There's no problem with any of these things. But one of the things we all need to learn is to develop sort of equanimity towards our pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings. You know? Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one of the goals, equanimity. So there's like evenness but I've started to think that absolutely has to be connected to compassion.
Of course it has to be.
Yeah, but I mean, for myself, I've just come to that, that they're really intertwined, because otherwise you can develop this flatness, you know.
Yeah, and that's not what the Buddha
No,
is saying.
No, but it has to be hand in hand with compassionate look at,
Well, I
if
think
something makes you angry or sad, or
Yeah,
whatever
but-
the emotion is that
Yeah.
rocks you out of this state of equilibrium,
Yeah.
equanimity, that you have to hold that in a way with, for me.
Yeah.
With compassion, not just try to stamp it
You never
down
want to suppress it.
or
Sup-
ignore it.
Right. But the point is, all the Buddhist teachings come down to self-compassion. Equanimity is going to help you. And why do we need help? Because we're stuck in cyclic existence of suffering. And equanimity is a tool to help us suffer less. So it's not to deny our different moods, but to recognize we don't have to give them a whole lot of power. Sometimes they do. They just, it's like it arises and you're there you are, So yeah, you have to deal with that. But you don't, in fact, what you do is you use that to remind yourself of true suffering, But the more we can look at our response to things, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, like if it's pleasant, what do you want to try to avoid? Yeah, attachment and craving. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to exaggerate it, for what, it can't do for you, so, because we make up these stories. And then if we're angry, what do we want to avoid?
Murder.
Yeah, and developing further. It's true though. We don't want to feed that to where we really think that the other person or the thing outside of us is responsible for our anger. We have anger because we've practiced it, So this idea that it's a reasonable response, yeah, it's a reasonable response if you want to suffer, because it's not pleasant to be angry. So we don't want to treat it as if it's, first of all, special. It's not special. Everybody feels it, We don't need to treat it as, oh, but this is the exception to the rule. This external event, merits this reaction, blah, blah, blah. No, it is just your reaction. And you don't suppress it. You accept it. You acknowledge it. But you also recognize it for a wrong consciousness. That it's telling you things that are not true. And then we have compassion for ourselves for reacting in that way, because it's always going to end up with suffering for ourselves. And this is where we are for a long, long time, as we're trying to work on our minds. But yeah, we have all these disturbing emotions that are out of control. They arise. Given the conditions are there, our habit is to respond in this way. But the more we can just go, oh, I'm angry, or anger has arisen, and you just can go, okay, this is the result of practicing anger, and you just have to, soothe yourself, have compassion for how miserable it feels, and then accept that it isn't a very effective strategy when bad things happen to you. It just adds more suffering to the situation.
And it passes, like it's like a song could come on the radio and all of a sudden, like you sing along with it after being angry, and it's like how, it's not a permanent state.
Yeah, and it's so wonderful when you notice that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not feeling that way anymore. Sometimes that takes 3 days. But what you don't want to do is make it turn into like resentment. You keep holding on to it, and then some other event happens, and then you make it bigger, and then you beat someone up. So we women don't generally beat someone up except for that. So, but it's really, flatness is not what we're after. It's really that we want to cherish everyone and cherish ourselves as valuable parts of the universe, you know, and that it, so we want to treat it kindly. We want to treat, with respect, with the fact that it's hard. Samsara really is not a great deal. But we can make it less of a painful deal if we work with our minds, because that's our biggest problem. As we take all of it too seriously. And it doesn't even exist the way it appears.
Tendrin?
Yep.
So speaking of anger,
It's a
How-
common topic.
how sometimes when I try and benefit others by pointing these things out to them, that it why get angry over it? There's nothing you can do about it. Like, they just get more angry. And so is it
Did
better
they
to
ask
just
you for the advice? Unasked
Yeah,
for
sometimes
advice.
they do. They do.
Okay, well then you have to be gentle with them and say, well, that's just my view. I'm sorry if it upset you, blah, blah, blah. Don't act like you're right. I mean, it's really just a conversation you can have. They ask for advice. You can say, well, you can share what works for you, but people are all, in their own samsaric mess, and so, and we don't have the wisdom yet to really be able to nail it, to be able to go, oh, plus they're not in a place to hear it, but you might be planting a seed that later on in a different circumstance or whatever, they remember it and they think, oh, that's true. Why am I sitting here? Like I can't change it. So I might just let it go,
Thank you.
So yeah. And skip the unasked for advice whenever you can,
Okay.
except when you're being a parent, but because that's just, it's just a perfect condition for things to blow up in your face. And what we have to look at is how, that's part of our arrogance, that's part of our pride thinking, oh, well, I know what will work for you, and we don't know. We know what works for us, and we don't always implement it, but we really don't know. So it's not everybody's in a what do you call it? They're not receptive, so yeah.
Well, that principle is especially difficult to apply to like a loved one with an addiction
Oh
to
yeah,
drugs.
it's brutal. It is, and you try to be, that's where you have to almost always turn to someone who's
Like with my sister, like we just had to force her to get treatment.
Yeah.
Or else she just wouldn't be here.
right, and sometimes that doesn't even work, so but yes, sometimes an intervention is necessary, and without it, people don't meet the conditions that help them be able to let go of the addiction, or at least work with the addiction, and it's terrible. All of it's terrible. The poor person feels like they're being imprisoned. I used to work at a substance abuse hospital for teenagers, and so they all were dragged in by their parents, and like physically, deposited with guards, it was a horrible, horrible situation, horrible experience, but some of them got better, some of them didn't, because sometimes, the parents would just drop them off to say, fix my child. And they never call them, they never home when the person was able to call, no hope. there.
Mm.
So it's just until they grow up enough to be able to say, well, in spite of my parents, I'm gonna take care of myself. So it's just, but it's, yeah, sometimes we have to, this is part of that interdependence as well. Sometimes if you see something, that you think this is going to kill them, you try to do something to prevent that, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, you know. But you want to try. It's just like teaching
They
a,
tried with me, like with marijuana addiction, and I just went right back.
yeah,
right back.
well, that's the thing. I mean, people have to be able to recognize what may be harming them, and they may disagree on that. So it's and the world changes. The world decides, it's whatever. But it's not benefiting others is not easy. And we don't really have the wisdom for it. And that's why we want to keep working with our minds, keep working on ignorance, keep trying to penetrate how things actually exist so that we become beings that actually can know, because they can read minds, they know their previous lives, they know all that they need to know to actually accurately help. That doesn't mean they can just tell them what to do, because we don't follow advice, but if they plant seeds and they find the technique that will work for them. That's why they say that there's so many world religions, because they're different dispositions of mind, and enlightened beings will use what works for you, and it's not going to be just one method. Yeah.
Yeah, I once read that the spiritual masters of the world all agree, basically, but it's their students
Yeah.
that disagree.
Yeah. And it's the students that they're trying to benefit. So they will, try all sorts of different techniques, or they may know what's the appropriate technique for them. But it's so we do our best with love and compassion and with understanding that this too could be you. That's a large, this recognition that, different, and then our next life, who knows what karma will ripen, so it's, sometimes we get it into our mind like, oh, I'll never be like that.
Yeah.
Have you looked at your mind lately? Given different conditions, you might be just like that. So, we just have to be, but, kindness and compassion are, the best leads of everything. Wisdom with both is most helpful, but if we don't have that, then at least we can be kind, and we have to recognize what kindness is, like compassion. We want to be compassionate to ourselves, but not mislead ourselves into thinking that, it doesn't matter what we do. It's, we have to have wisdom in our, whether we're firm with ourselves or firm with someone else, because, not everything responds to just, oh, that's okay, dear. Because it's not always okay. Not at all. So, these things are hard. And I think families of active addicts, really struggle. It's very painful to watch. And we've got so many deadly drugs on the market. It's just, and of course, they're doing nothing but seeking relief, which is exactly what we do. I feel very lucky. I never tried any. I'm afraid of authority. I'm not kidding. I was just like, no, I'm not doing it. Because I was part of that generation where everybody, I didn't do any of that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because, and that's this is the thing,
When I was going to college, we learned that marijuana was the gateway
Yeah.
to bigger and
Yeah, I remember
stronger
that
drugs.
argument.
And now it's pretty much legal. So
Yeah.
what is that?
Well, you know, because we like to
Allowing.
tell people what to do.
I mean, huh? I'm sorry, I missed it.
We like to tell people what to do.
In junior high school, we saw reefer madness.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
assembly at night.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh,
I saw that
that
on
was
YouTube.
so exaggerated.
Well, I mean, we don't know what we also don't know, you know, and there's also some people have tremendous harm from it because they lose so many brain cells, they have no memory at 40, you know, so it depends on your physiology. So, yeah, well, whatever.
We know what you said.
So, you know, but it's just, but when, you know, it's just like if you have mental illness in the family and they are out of control due to their mental illness, it is painful. You know, and there's a lot of harm that goes on, and there's a lot, and it's hard to hang in there. So, you know, so this is again the suffering of samsara, and it's just terrible.
Okay, what about like chronic yo-yo dieters in the family?
You know, you don't have
Like
to.
my mom.
Yeah,
Like,
unasked for advice is not welcome.
Well, I've experienced like witnessing my mom go through many health problems related
but
to
that doesn't
food
matter.
throughout her life.
Your job is not to change her. None of us can change someone else. We can just be
I
a
can see
model.
that she wants nothing more in the world but to change.
Yeah, but she's got to find her path. You know, we can say that we want to change, but until we're willing to face the struggle, it doesn't really mean much. You know, and people are stuck. I mean, it's not because they really want to suffer. Nobody wants to suffer, but they've developed habits of mind that they haven't been able to figure out how to undo.
I just kind of like feel a sense of guilt, like when my mom like asked me to get her ice cream or candy or something, like
You don't have to do it.
I feel like wrong doing it.
Yeah, well, then maybe you shouldn't do it. I mean, that's
So she's
your
my mom.
choice. Yeah, well, that's a nice, you see, this is compassion and wisdom. You know, the wisdom part of you says, not a good plan. The compassion part of you says, but she's suffering. Well, she's going to continue to suffer whether you give it to her or not. You
But
know,
I have to give it to her
because
she's
what?
my mom.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's your problem. That's the mind you need to work with because it's not true. Just like your sister.
So I'm wondering, what is the overarching Buddhist view of, I'm thinking of population charts where human population for
Gets bigger and bigger and
thousands
bigger.
of years, and then in 1800 it starts, and we're now up here. So it's now 9 billion
Yep.
souls in samsara.
Not souls, but people. Not souls, but sentient beings.
Sentient beings.
Human beings who
Human
can all
beings.
have the chance to
Yeah.
become enlightened in this
Instead
very
of, like,
life.
100,000 of this net.
Yeah, we were
That's
just
not-
living someplace else. I mean, it's not, it's good news that there's so many human beings because the cause for being born human is a lot of merit. You know, you have to have practiced ethics. Now, if you don't have a perfect human rebirth, you know, so you don't have enough resources, so we're all a mixed bag, right? But, you know, if you're born into a war zone, you know, it's like not such a great human rebirth, but doesn't mean you still have a sophisticated support for your mind, you know, but whether you have the conditions to be able to work with it or something else again. But yeah, it's like there's not just one planet. It's not only one place to live. This is a manifestation of our collective karma. We're born on this planet because we created the cause to be on this planet. We might not be born on this planet next time. You know,
Is the Buddhist view of other universes, other planets,
other
other realms?
realms, everything. You know, this is our existence is shaped by our past actions. That's why Buddhists have Pure Lands. They're called
Yeah,
Pure
do-
Lands just
do
because
they
there's
have one?
nothing negative going on in it. So, but this just reflects our karma.
I bring you back to that you were saying before about the realm of the gods.
Yep, they got,
Okay, so we're here in Samsara, we're trying,
so are they.
we're in Samsara?
Yeah,
I thought.
there's the hell beings, they're in samsara, the hungry ghosts, they're in samsara, the animal beings, they're in samsara, the human beings, they're in samsara, the god realms, which they have demigods and full-fledged gods, I guess, and they're all part of, they're all in samsara.
Your land.
I thought that.
Pure Lands are Buddha lands. They're not in samsara.
Okay, so I had a wrong idea. I thought the realm of the gods was like, there's
No.
no problems, no suffering.
Yeah, that's true,
Okay, so.
but they're gonna fall because
Why do
it's,
you- That's what I wanted to ask you, because you said that
they're burning up all their good karma.
So why would someone want to go there?
They
Why-
don't. No, anybody sane doesn't want to end up there.
I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, well, it's not, because you just waste all your good karma and you fall back, and usually you fall to the hell realm. It's not a good place to be.
So who ends up there?
People who are after the good life, and they live well, they're generous, they're kind, but they have no conception of like maybe stopping suffering, getting out of the suffering realm, but they do all these wonderful things that causes them to have great resources, good health, good looks, all those
That's me,
kind of
me,
things.
me.
They have 1,000 years, they live 1,000 years. Obviously not here, but, but it's akin to, like, I don't know, those rich people we don't even know about, because they're so rich that, they're not celebrities, they're not, whatever, they're just, so, so all you're doing is all that's happening for you for 999, 354 days, sort of, approximately, you're doing nothing but exhausting good karma that's ripening.
So suffering is really good for us.
Yeah, we have the right amount of suffering to want to get out. And if you have a precious human rebirth where you have good resources, good conditions, you meet the teachings, all this stuff, we actually have the tools to learn to be able to head that way. Yes.
So I would like more clarification on what the missing ingredient is in people who end up in the God realm. Like, what are they missing?
They're missing the fact that their ignorance is keeping them stuck in samsara. That they, so the last week of the life in the hell realms is you start to smell bad, you lose all your friends because they've never seen such a thing, and it takes about a week to die. And so you're aware of this. You're going through the suffering of the dissolution of your God body, but they live, the life that kind of like, they live good lives in the sense of their actions and their speech and probably their mind, they want to help others. They do help others. They make good money and they use it for good purposes, da, 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 da. They just do all that. They just want a good life and they consider life good enough, samsara good enough. It doesn't even occur to them that there might be a way to end suffering. They just accept suffering as part of life.
So if they're doing good things for other people, they consider that part of their good life more than acting on their compassion.
And they might be acting on their compassion. They don't see a possibility that you can get out of samsara.
But they don't feel like they're in samsara.
Yeah, they do when they were here. They got born in the God realms, but they were here first.
But that's part of the problem, because you don't remember where you were.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. That's exactly right. And it's also part of the problem when people, like I used to worry about this with my stepmom, because as far as she was concerned, life was good enough. She had the usual, so her sister died from scarlet fever when she was, 17, her husband died of cancer, her next husband died of Alzheimer's, uh, so life was hard. She knew life was hard, but she also had a good life and she did good deeds and she did all those kind of good things. But she was satisfied with that. That's all you
Isn't
can
that
expect out of
accepting?
life.
Isn't that accepting that we're in samsara and we're gonna go through some difficult times? And
Well, it's saying that that's the only way it can be. It's accepting samsara as permanent.
There's not a choice.
That's not a way out. They don't meet any teachings that tell them that they, like, by the way, there's a way to end suffering.
Sure hope that's true.
Yeah, I'm just a better person following this path. It's not true. It doesn't matter.
Still better, yeah.
Oh, I sleep better. I don't have as many regrets. It's horrible being a horrible person and being selfish and always thinking about yourself first and blah, 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 blah. But so you're always doing things that hurt others. And then you go, oh my God, I have to live with that. It sucks. So yeah, I'm happy to follow a path that teaches you how to act right. And then I'm happy to have this in the idea that there's a way to end suffering. Yeah, if there is a way to end suffering, I want that for everybody. Because I don't think suffering serves any good purpose other than us wanting to get out of samsara.
So the example I mentioned before, these people, they have compassion. They're looking to do things to end other people's suffering, but they're not really looking for how they contribute to end suffering.
They don't know that there's a possibility of ending suffering.
They don't really see that there's more
Mhm.
that they can do.
Mm-hmm. And
When,
they like the good life. Yeah. Go
sorry.
ahead.
There's a little question in the chat.
Okay.
That was me. When we were talking about God realms, I
Yeah.
said, so we believe like in gods, but not really a god.
No, we don't even believe in gods. It's just called a God realm because it's very, very nice.
Oh,
They're
but yeah,
not
we don't want to go
necessar-
there.
Well, then, yeah, we don't want to go there, but it's like, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of information on the different realms. It's not a big part of the curriculum. So, but like they'll talk about the gods that were talked about in the time of the Buddha, Indra and other, Brahma, stuff like that. And they say that they're in a God realm or that, but they haven't got the right view, but they're not in a God realm like a pure land, which is only enlightened beings, can live in pure lands. And occasionally, those of us who some miraculous reason are able to be born in one to learn the rest of the Dharma. Good to pray for that. It's not so easy to accomplish. So,
Thank
but yeah,
you.
so but mostly their lives are just, they get everything they want. They like everything they eat. They're beautiful. All the people around them are beautiful. It's all, just lovely. I can't really picture it because I don't know what that would be like.
So they don't have the Dharma, is that it? That they?
No, they don't have the Dharma. Why would they want the Dharma? Their life's great.
But the Dharma is the teaching of the Buddha, right? That's what.
Yeah.
So that
Well, and how many people know about that?
not a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
Not,
And the God realms would be full of them.
but are they on this earth?
No, obviously not. They live 1,000
but
years.
No, people who are very happy, they're very rich, they're
Yeah,
very
yeah.
successful, they're very beautiful,
They're
So
similar to that.
I
And if they really are attached to that lifestyle, yet they weren't greedy and they weren't mindless of others, if they weren't all those things, they may be creating the cause to be born in a God realm. Well, they'll just exhaust all their good karma because they don't have an opportunity to have many merit because everybody has all that. There's nobody to help. There's nobody who needs anything. You don't have to practice patience because everything's going your way. Nobody's trying to harm. None of that happens. The demigod realm's a little different. The demigod realm is filled of just jealous people who hate the God realm because they're aware of them, each other. So they're very jealous, very blah, blah, blah.
God realm, like the bourgeois realm.
Yeah. And then you have the wish I could get there realm. That's the demigod realm. But we all recognize
That's like
these,
the workers.
and then that's like the animal realm and the hungry, well, the hungry goes in, but really, yeah. But they don't even serve the God realm, but they just want to be there. They miss the boat.
So we really have to appreciate being here in this life.
Yeah, that we
That's
have just enough suffering to want to get out. And we have the right kind of physical support for the mind so that we have the ability to figure things out. And we met the teachings. That's why there's a difference between a human rebirth and a perfect human rebirth, because a perfect human rebirth, you have the right conditions to meet the teachings, you meet the teachings. You
So
have
are we considered perfect rebirth?
Yeah,
Because we're here?
absolutely. You have good condition.
I never thought of myself as perfect.
No, but you're not perfect. But it's a perfect human rebirth.
life.
It's not that either. Perfect human rebirth means you have enough suffering that you might want to get out. Okay? You have a human brain, which is a good support for a human mind that helps you get out. Yeah, and it works. That's one of the things I say. If you don't have good faculties, you don't have a perfect human rebirth. You meet the teachings. So you meet the path, the tools to get you out. What's the other things? The Buddhism still exists.
Leisure, you have time to do it.
And you have time and resources to do it. Not everybody can, show up to a class, have free time at all. Most of the world doesn't. So it's all those things that make it a perfect human rebirth. Why is it perfect? Because it can get you to enlightenment. People become enlightened in the human realm.
Well, that's a big jump, right?
Yes, it is. But we have everything we need in order to work out how to quit causing suffering for ourselves and to penetrate how things actually exist. So we have to do both to get out. The reason why you need the merit is that you need to remove the obstacles to the wisdom. Because our negative states of mind are what causes obstacles. It makes our mind clouded by disturbing emotions, we just miss it. We miss the point. So it takes effort. But we have all the things that we need. But not everybody does.
I really don't even, well, like my brother said, well, did you go to church on Easter or, something like that? I don't even want to say I'm studying Buddhism.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother.
actually did, but they have no idea and they don't want to hear.
No.
because it's too
They're not
outlandish.
interested. Well, they're not interested.
It's too different.
It's just that they're not interested. And nothing worse than a beginner Buddhist and boring people to death. Oh, I know what would work for you. I just learned this. Da, 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 big mistake. Yeah. It's not something, there's no need to share it. If they're interested, if they say, oh, I just read an article about blah, 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 or heard a podcast on blah, 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 or it was kind of interesting, then you can go, oh, yeah, I've heard of that too. That's an opening, but otherwise, it's not, because you don't want to turn someone off the Dharma for eons.
No.
Well, because that's what will work. If they hear about it and they think, oh man, that's crazy, they won't be attracted to it in their next life or the next life or the next life. So
What is it that attracts someone to the Dharma?
previous encounters with it.
Why
You know,
does it
so-
work when Christians?
I'm sorry,
Why does it work when Christians
when they do what?
evangelize and tell people?
Because
about
they meet
Jesus?
people who have that disposition of mind that think that it fits for them. That means it's a great mind. It just means that I mean that's we just don't proselytize in Buddhism. So which is why all the teachers are very uncomfortable about marketing the. It's like the antithesis of what of what the teachings say. So, but this is the way the world is. So.
So like, did the Tibetans learn Buddhism because they just wanted to learn it?
Because they were born into a culture that was immersed in it, and they created the cause for that.
Well, like before that culture existed.
Yeah, I mean, but they created the cause. Enough people created the cause to create a Buddhist environment. And so, and then they asked Atisha to come, and bring the Dharma. So they created the desire for that.
Can you tell me more about Atisha? I mean, I see the name written, but
He
I
brought the teachings to Tibet.
I
This is
thought Buddha did.
Buddha brought him to India.
Buddha started in India?
Yeah, it's sort of like a part of, I think, Nepal or something. Well, it was Nepal, but it was,
I had no idea.
just read some history. Interesting. I don't know much about all of that.
So Atisha brought Buddhism.
He
to
brought the
Tibet.
teachings that he had learned in Nalanda in India, and someone requested him to come, one of the kings.
Thank you.
And then they asked him to stay. I can't even remember now. I'm not a history buff. I'm really not good at it.
I thought Atisha was a woman.
Well, that's too bad. It's Tibet. Very little chance of that. Yeah, there's some.
Because it's male.
Yeah, it's your usual
Oh,
stuff.
so-
We created the cause for that,
Would have been dangerous.
But I read
but they
that book.
didn't travel alone. But there weren't many in India either, I mean, in almost no country were women allowed to ordain. None of the Southern transmission, none of the Theravadan countries, full ordination for nuns doesn't exist in Tibet because they didn't allow that, so it's a typical, this is our world. So, it must have been really bad. I really think I was a chauvinistic dentist in a previous life. I've been tortured in the dentist office, and I'm female in this life. So, you just trade places. I must have oppressed women in a previous life. But we create the cause. Doesn't mean we like the result. In fact, we shouldn't like the result because that helps us change.
I was always fascinated that the American philosopher, William James,
Mhm.
predicted at the turn of the 20th century the coming of Eastern religion. So he must have seen something about something ripening in
Well,
the West.
And also philosophers really talk to each other. They really have it's amazing how the networking of people who think, think outside of the box, I guess. It's kind of interesting. So maybe, well, it's like, who was it what's the prediction that when the iron bird flies,
Not Nostradamus, is that? what you-
no, Tibetan Buddhism will come to the West. Like an airplane.
Airplane.
Oh. But that's the luminous bird.
Oh, well, picky. So it's interesting. And His Holiness, always says that he thinks, that the opportunity to bring the Dharma to the West was a really good thing about exile. So giving up his ritzy lifestyle also was a very good thing. Because, they treated the Dalai Lama like royalty. So, anyway, all right.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, anyway. So rejoice in all your efforts. None of this stuff's easy. And it's a complete view of everything, of existence. And none of it matches what we grew up with. So, it's challenging. Okay.
Let me
Thanks for your questions at home and here. Yeah. What? I'm getting ready to share the screen. So rejoice. So this is one of those ways in which we practice what was advised. We turn our merits over to the great enlightenment, and we remind ourselves that it's that we're doing this job to bring everybody into that state, not suffering. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may we quickly attain the state of Guru Buddhas and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, we too dedicate all these merits in the best way that we may follow their perfect example. That's not going to be right. Yeah. Okay. Because of all the merits of the 3 times created by us and all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other sentient beings, may there be no wars, famines, disease, quarreling, fighting, or unhappy minds. May there be great prosperity, and may everything needed be easily obtained. May all the human beings in the world be guided by spiritual leaders teaching only Dharma, and may everyone enjoy the happiness of Dharma. May everyone have perfect conditions and have only compassion and love for each other in their mind streams, and may they only benefit and never harm each other. May this next. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you were the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. So they advised us to keep saying this prayer. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losam father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that's never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. What pages make sense?
45.
Avalokitesvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion. Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom. Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras. Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the sages of the land of snows. To Lozandrapa, at your feet I make request. All right, we're going to just do it once. Okay, what do I do now? Stop share. Stop recording.